Welcome to the Hidden Composers podcast, where we discuss people we may know from history books, but unbeknownst to us, they compose music. Hi, I'm Brenna Green.
And I'm Cameron Meckling. Before we dive into our first episode, we just want to give a little background on what we're all about. The Hidden Composers podcast is co-hosted by music history enthusiast and pianist Brenna Green and yours truly, composer Cameron Meckling. In this series, we discuss famous people from history who are little known for their music composing pursuits. After providing an overview of their life, then we'll share info about the composer's musical output and style in comparison with the musical influences of their time. Occasionally, guest speakers will appear on the show to offer expertise on specific performance practice, interesting facts about a composition, or insight into the composer's life. We hope you enjoy. Okay, let's dive in now with Brenna Green.
Today, our hidden composer will be Sir William Herschel. Many consider William Herschel to be the father of modern astronomy. He was a pioneer in construction of astronomical instruments and devices, including precursors to the modern telescope. He also had several major scientific findings, most notably the discovery of infrared radiation and the identification of the planet Uranus. So let's set the scene for William Herschel's early life by taking a look at his musical beginnings. He was born in Hanover, Germany in 1738. He studied the oboe from an early age with his father, who was a player in the Hanover Infantry Band. William played violin as well, recounting that his father taught him to play on a small violin as soon as he was able to hold one. William Herschel wrote in a letter that his father, who was a musician, destined for him to be in the same profession, that he might acquire a perfect knowledge of the theory as well as of the practice of music. He was set at an early age to study mathematics in all its branches. Eventually, William Herschel joined the same military band as his father, playing both violin and oboe. He was a highly skilled harpsichordist and organist as well. And this versatility as a performer was really not unusual for the time. During this time in William's life, he proved very industrious by not only pursuing a music career, but he also studied French, English, ethics, logic, metaphysics, and mathematics. Despite his lack of university education, he availed himself of every opportunity to expand his knowledge. University education was much less common in the 18th century. During the 7 Years' War that embroiled much of Germany between 1756 and 1763, William Herschel's father urged him to flee his homeland of Hanover. At the age of 19, Herschel left his home and attempted to establish himself musically in London. He was essentially in exile, living on the edge of poverty during his first years there. But he found work as a copyist and a music teacher before finally obtaining a position as the musical director for the Durham Band in 1760. As a performing musician, William put his study of natural philosophy to use, as it was of interest to many of his employers and patrons. In this age of enlightenment, natural philosophy was perceived as a polite topic, much as weather is today. William's innate curiosity in the study of natural philosophy led him to such texts as Robert Smith's Philosophy of Musical Sounds, Herschel was also drawn to Smith's complete system of optics, which detailed telescope construction. Completely taken by this new field of study, Herschel apprenticed himself to a local mirror builder and began work on his own telescope. He was assisted in this by his brother and sister, who moved with him to England. He is said to have polished mirrors for up to 16 hours per day, and these would be inserted into a telescope tube. All those hours of repetitive practice on musical instruments must have developed his level of patience. Now, this takes us to a huge turning point in William Herschel's life. In 1781, he found the first planet to be discovered by telescope, the first planet to be discovered since ancient times. He originally named it after the King of England, George. Clearly, he wanted to stay in the king's good graces, but the name was eventually changed to Uranus, as we know it today. He also made subsequent discoveries of 2 moons of Uranus in 1781. William's sister, Caroline Herschel, aided him in many of his astronomical pursuits. After his discovery of Uranus, William Herschel's composing motivation began to fall significantly. And this was most likely because he was granted a pension by King George III and didn't have to worry about using this as a career. Caroline Herschel is also recognized during her time becoming the first woman to pursue astronomy as a profession, and she made several important discoveries of her own and achieved great renown by the end of her life. In the late 1780s, William and Caroline set to work on the world's largest telescope at the time. It was a 40-foot monster constructed under the patronage of George III. In 1800, William Herschel announced yet another scientific discovery of his own, that of infrared radiation. William was knighted in 1816 and thereby appointed as court astronomer. He died in Slough, England on August 25, 1822, having identified a new planet, cataloged 145 double stars, and discovered over 2,500 new nebulae, all while composing 24 symphonies, 14 concertos, 87 pieces for organ, and various vocal works. We're going to take a short break, and then we'll be back with more on William Herschel and his musical works.
Hey everyone. I just wanted to take this time to shamelessly plug our Facebook, YouTube, and Instagram accounts, where we will announce our new episode topics as we get the ball rolling here at Hidden Composers. You can find a listen-along playlist on our YouTube channel, where we have a collection of songs dedicated to each composer we talk about. You can also help support us through donations on our Patreon page, where you can access full interviews with our wonderful guests and even request hidden composers for future episodes. Don't forget to subscribe on your podcast app. Your ratings and reviews help our podcast grow. In the days of William Herschel, Mozart, Haydn, Salieri, and Bach's children, Carl Philipp Emanuel Bach and Johann Christian Bach, were prolific and active. You could say that Herschel was in good company. In other fields, we find philosophers and writers like Jean-Jacques Rousseau in France and Friedrich von Schiller in Germany. Schiller wrote the poem which later became the text to the final movement in Beethoven's Ninth Symphony, Ode to Joy. As is typical in Herschel's works, the form is melodically and harmonically simple, with a clear structure emphasizing rationality. Instead of relying on a thematic development of a motive, he uses repetition to build up a sense of urgency and forcefulness. Herschel's use of the popular galant style in his writing breaks down even more specifically in the Stil, which translates roughly to sensible sentimentality. What primarily delineates the Stil to the larger umbrella term galant style is that it often veers away from the flashy ornamentation. Herschel often utilized the Baroque style of the ritornello form all throughout his music. His music is quite enjoyable, but even in the height of his skill and prolificacy, he is still eclipsed by the looming giants that are Mozart and Haydn.
So, can any parallels be drawn between his interest in astronomy and his music career? Was he inspired by that in some way?
I mean, your question makes me think of, for example, Pythagoras and his concept of the music of the spheres. This is like the ancient alliance that exists between music and astronomy. Well, we don't really see any mystic or cosmic aspect prevalent in Herschel's musical style. Like Bach, Herschel was very practical about his composing. He only wrote music that was directly related to his teaching, church work, and other music-related employment. But all that being said, his compositions are still fresh and engaging.
And did you find much of his musical work was composed after he became famous as an astronomer?
No, actually. After his discovery of the planet we know today as Uranus, Herschel immediately transitioned from a successful musician to the most honored astronomer of his time. With his new claim to fame, Herschel, the musician, rapidly faded into history. The organ, chamber, and symphonic music of Herschel practically disappeared from public musical performances during the 19th and 20th centuries. Every now and then, a performance of his music will pop up alongside a program of Mozart and Haydn, but not too often. It is great that we celebrate successful hidden composers such as Herschel. It goes to show that in life it is possible to achieve your passions and look to the stars.
This concludes our first episode of Hidden Composers. I want to give a big shout out to our audio engineer, Jacob Zaring, for all of his help.
We'll see you all next time with a brand new episode where we will be talking about the infamous poet, Ezra Pound. Thanks for listening.